Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to have you here with us in London. I saw Motel Destino back in Cannes last year. Feel like I can still remember it, like a very visceral experience. But for people who haven't seen it yet, can you give us a brief introduction? What can they expect going into your movie?
What I think I would love to say about the movie is that it's a movie which is very much about solidarity. It's something that I've been sort of thinking about lately, and it's a love story, but at the end of the day, it is really about like people getting together and, and taking vengeance against something that's been oppressing them. So I think this is one side of the film, and I think the other side, I think it's a fun, sexy love triangle story taking place, just under the equator. So it's also very much like an homage to film noir and all that tradition of cinema that was talking about people that are kind of fractured and searching for their way in life, really.
And there's such specificity, to the feel of the film, the aesthetic, the location, these characters. What was the initial spark of the idea? Was it this love motel? Was it these characters? Was it the place? What sparked
I think
it?
the initial inspiration was to make something that's vital and visceral and colorful and explosive and free. I think it's a movie that was also made just after 4 years of really hard times in Brazil. And I think the initial inspiration was to make something which is almost combustible and celebratory of life. And then the idea of shooting something in a motel was something that was always, in my mind. And I was just asking myself, why was this never done? It's these places in Brazil which are very specific to Brazilian culture, which has these are places where people meet, to make love and to have fun. But they're very specific in the sense that they are all over the country, and they're normally on the outskirts of like big cities or small cities. And I always thought it was such an interesting place to make a thriller, because there's such a huge tradition in cinema, with hotels. And I think the motel for me was taking it to another level where it would be a very playful place, to shoot a movie and to tell a story. So, and the colors, I think I'm very much into colors. I think I could never make a black and white film. I don't think it's something that I could ever even dream of, because I dream so much in sort of high colors. And I think on this movie, I really took it to an extreme. I think for me, it was really interesting to think of not only that place in the world is a place where the colors are very saturated, the light is very bright, but also I really wanted to do something thinking that this is somehow in conversation with film noir. Like noir uses a lot of shadows, and here I thought colors would be a good way to replace shadows and to create tension. So this is something that was like in the inception of the film from the beginning. And then the characters, right? Because I think it's like it's a very sort of character-driven film, and these are people that I've always wanted to portray on the screen. These are people, I come from where the film was shot, and I always felt like we needed to have ourselves on the screen more. And so this is sort of a celebration of people from that part of the country, that part of the world. And the three characters are coming from very different walks of life, and that's what makes the story, that they're so different from each other, and there's so many friction between them.
And what a contrast to Firebrand, which we spoke about previously, which had even been in Cannes the previous year. Was there a yearning from you perhaps to return to Brazil and do something that was kind of maybe back to your roots, back to your culture, after doing something that was, from English history, was that something that was a yearning for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was very interesting. When I was doing Firebrand, I remember being, where we shot the film in the Peak District, and it was just the beginning of spring, but it was still quite, throughout the whole pre-production process, everything was very cloudy and English and Midlands. And I really felt like I wanted to, after Firebrand, to do something which was contemporary, which was explosive, as I said before, that had somehow something to do with Firebrand by contrast, So I really also wanted to shoot in Portuguese again. It was great, wonderful to do Firebrand, but I really was yearning for something which was home. So that's how Motel Destino came about. And it's funny because I remember being in Cannes the year before, and just the week before we were in Cannes, I was actually location scouting for Motel Destino. So it was kind of happening just as Firebrand was being born. And I think it had a lot to do with that, it was sort of the antipode of what Firebrand was in terms of cinema.
And what did this motel kind of represent for you? Because I guess it's obviously a very literal place, but it also feels quite metaphorical at times, like a kind of purgatory. And it's both where this character is hiding, but he's also trapped. So, what did you want it to sort of take on in that sense?
It's such a good question, because the motel for me is a place of danger and of possibility. I think it's both. It's like desire in a way. So I think it was the sort of metaphor of what desire is, like you desire what you can't have. And when you have it, it's a lot of fun. And it's also a place of absolute playfulness. You can do anything you want because you're, anonymous in that place, but at the same time, it's also a place where you're quite trapped, and it's surrounded by walls, and it has this sort of similarity to almost like a jail in a way, but it's also a place where, as I said before, anything can happen. And so I think these two elements for me were really interesting elements to talk about. The main character, he's sort of a runaway kid trying to sort of escape something, and then he's trapped in this place where everything is possible, but also that he cannot leave, So I think there was this contradiction there that I thought was really great. And it was the first time actually that because the motel is also like a theater, there's these rooms that you go and you pay and you disappear in them and nobody knows who you are. It's very anonymous, but yet there's the backstage and people who work there. And I've always been fascinated by what's on the other side, like on one side, it's absolute everything. And then on the other side, there's people working, making sure that this is functioning. So for me, it was also this high and low conversation between, what's in the backstage and what's in the front stage. And so there was so much there to play with in terms of a place which is sort of the core of a story.
Sort of digging in a bit to what we were saying about the look and feel of the film and making it, visceral and intense. It's like the heat is sort of coming off the screen. And, how did you work with Helene Louvet in particular to kind of capture both the look of it, that sensation of heat, but also the sounds, So when you're watching it, there's an intensity to the experience that you kind of can't escape in a way. And it's something that's both alluring, but can also be quite kind of off-putting at other moments.
Yeah, completely. It's the third film I did with Helene. We did Invisible Life, then we did Firebrand, and then we did this. And I think for us, I was talking to her the other day, every movie needs to be sort of like a new lover or a new experience. And on this one, what we wanted to do again was something that could capture the light, the heat, like literally the heat. This is a part of the world which is literally like 4 degrees under the equator. And it's like there's no seasons. It's summer all year long. Maybe there's like 1 month where it rains. And we also wanted to capture something which was very close to the characters. This is a movie that it's always with the characters more than with the frame. And so this was part of like what we were playing with when we were thinking of making this. And for us, it was really important to shoot this in film. So we shot this on 16 because the light there is so strong that I don't think digital is the best for that latitude in the world. And so as a result, we have something which is very saturated, which is very temperature-wise, it is very hot. And I'm happy when you say something like this, because I hope sometimes it's very hard to capture heat on the screen. It's really, I think sometimes it's easy, everything seems a bit clean and a bit cold. And I think for us it was very important to sort of work with contrast, work with grain, and actually I think the other thing that's important to say, it's the role of the body in this film, like how the bodies are what the characters are left with. And so the presence of the characters on screen and very close to the camera also something that we want to do. So I think it's a combination of all these things. And the sound as well, like it was really interesting because this is a place where from room to room you don't hear anything, but if you're working, there's this corridor, which is this very interesting place within the place, which connects all the rooms, which is a lot of the movie takes place in this corridor that's connecting the room. And there, like, the sounds really, really, like, percolate. And then you can hear everything. And it's really off-putting, as you say, because it's almost like being in bed with someone, but yet there's a wall between somebody who's working and somebody who's in bed. So this was something that, for me, was super important to capture.
And, of course, the film hinges on this kind of trio of Geraldo, Diana, and Elias. How did you choose who were going to play these characters? And I guess, was it kind of a bit of a leap of faith for all of you? Because, there is a lot of sex scenes, nudity, their bodies are on show. But it feels like there must have been a great sense of trust between you all to kind of really kind of go on that journey together.
No, absolutely. It's very interesting because the 3 main characters come from very different places in life and in their acting experience. So for me, it was really important that one of the characters, the older male character, was not from the region, that he had a body and a language, and like a language, I mean an accent and a way of sort of moving that was very much from Rio. And São Paulo, I mean, it's important to talk about Brazil in the sense that there's a big divide between the North and the South. And so he is a very well-known sort of film and TV star. And then Heraldo has never been on a movie set before. That's his first movie. That's his first work as an actor. The character, Natalie, who plays Diana, is a very sort of experienced theater actor. So they come from very different places. And I think for me, it was very important to, it's like music, you know, it was super important to equalize and to have them in the same register. But as you said, there was a lot of trust. I think there was a lot of trust because there's a lot of situations which are very, very intimate. And I think sex here in this movie is such a huge part of it because it's really where the characters meet, you know, like it's not through language. They come from very different places in the world. And I think it's through sexual encounter and sort of these intimate moments. So it was really beautiful, you know, to go through this journey together and to understand that it's not sex for the sake of sort of shooting sex for the screen, but actually to tell the story.
You know, and then you've got these kind of maybe almost like grotesque moments that come in with like the donkeys that are outside, which again, maybe adds to what you were saying at the beginning, that there's also something kind of playful there. So kind of how did you want to maybe provoke the audience a bit or kind of knock them off, you know, their expectations somehow?
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting because as you said before, I think making this movie, particularly at this time in the world, I really wanted to not only be visceral and colorful and joyful, but also provocative. I feel sometimes that we're entering, particularly in cinema, a place, you know, a place of safeness, you know, that I think it's important. I was very, very inspired by 1970s, both 1970s sort of sexploitation tradition, but also early 1980s kind of, you know, erotic thrillers. I thought there was such a sense of freedom in those movies and a sense of challenging an audience instead of just appeasing an audience, and to create empathy, but also to create, you know, a sense of friction there that I think it's such a big part of, you know, making films. And so that was my big inspiration, what I just said, in the sense that particularly in Brazil, it was a moment in history that we're coming out of, like, it's not a dictatorship because it was elected, but really horrible sort of extreme right-wing years. And I think making this movie and making particularly that story, it was a way also to sort of come back to life, you know, to come back to a sense of vitality. And I was very inspired by a tradition of cinema that was done in Brazil, which is sort of a subgenre of sexploitation, which was a tradition, is the name in Portuguese is called porno chanchada, but it means like sex comedies. And for me, it was a really interesting tradition because it had a huge sense of humor. There was a certain sense of trashiness, which I really appreciate because that's humanity. But it was also something that was done in a moment in the, you know, in the history of the country, which was very repressive. So I think there was this sense of doing something which was challenging, not only where we are in the world. I mean, it's very hard to say this because cinema is so diverse, you know, so there's different traditions. But like, I was really interested in sort of bringing a sense of freedom to the screen there.
In terms of how you want people to leave the cinema, is there, you know, a particular image, a thought you want to have, you know, a feeling? I mean, it's touching on so many themes, you know, about kind of class and, you know, the element of abuse that she suffered, you know, at the hands of her partner. But then, as we said, on the other side, there's this kind of, you know, indulging in pleasure and finding love and finding connection. Yeah. So there's sort of a lot in the mix there.
Listen, there is. It's hard, you know, as a director of a movie to say kind of what you wanted to say, but yet why not? And I think that on this case, I was really interested in making a fun, provocative, sexy, enjoyable movie, but at the same time, there is always like, what is the theme, right? Like, what is it that's really driving you to do this besides, you know, a piece of entertainment? And I think on the case of Motel Destino, it was very much about solidarity. I feel like we live in a moment in the world where I feel like we're choosing, in one hand, the right enemies, and at the same time, we're not finding the right allies. And I think on this case, it's very much the story of a woman who has been sort of hostage of an abusive relationship with the guy who is the owner, in the case of the film, the owner of the motel, and who doesn't really have the courage to leave. And she also has a lot to lose. Like, she's built this place together with him, and I think if she left it, she would have nothing to take with her, you know? And so, and one day there's a boy that shows up and who is running away from something that he didn't really do, but he's been blamed for doing it. And I think they find each other, you know, and I think it is love, not in the sense of romantic love, like they find each other and they identify with each other for different reasons, but also there's a lot in common, which is not, you know, right in front of you. And I think for me, if I could say something about Motel Destino, it is using the codes of noir cinema and erotic thrillers and all of those sort of inspirations for the film, but really to talk about the possibility that together we can maybe revert, you know, the state of things. And sometimes through violence, sometimes through playfulness. But I think for me, it's very funny. I arrived in the UK today and I was reading about the results of the elections today here. And it's just like, it's like epidemic, you know, like it's everywhere, you know, the rise of like intolerant, really intolerant neo-fascist regimes. And I think if we should, you know, if we should do something, it's just sort of be, you know, sort of align against those regimes, you know, and be surrounded by common themes. And I think to tell a story very short, I think it is about solidarity. It's a love story, but I think love in this case is sort of identifying somebody that you can, you know, go to town with, you know, and sort of bring things down. So I think this is really what was moving me. And I think on the case of this film, in particularly talking about context, we were coming, again, I've said this a few times in this interview, like from a very kind of horrible times politically in Brazil. And I think for me, what I wanted to do is to say that, yes, we can bring this, you know, we can be together and somehow make a difference. That's what was in my mind in the beginning of the story.
So having it premiere in Cannes, what did that feel like? How did it perhaps play out differently to the audience there as it has done back in Brazil? And now, of course, bringing it to a British audience. Like, do you feel like there is a different reaction?
Listen, I think it was very interesting in Cannes because I think you said you were there in the screening, like it was just like fire, you know. I was quite surprised because I said, oh, people won't get this, but it was really exciting and I couldn't really believe it because I was like, oh really, so this does translate. But yet it was very interesting then to release it a couple months later in Brazil, because there's one element of the movie which is the sense of humor, and that the sense of humor is a very subtle sense of humor, that it's very much through language and accent. And I think also there's a real kind of understanding the question of the motel, you know, which is kind of the centerpiece, especially of the film and of the location of the film and the arena of the film. It's something that's very well known in Brazil, and there's a sense of like playfulness and fun that I think it was much more sort of understood in the context of the Brazilian release than anywhere else. But it was really exciting to bring it to Cannes, because I also think that there was, for me, which was really wonderful to be there with this movie. I couldn't really believe when we got invited to go to competition, because for me, this was a movie that I did. It was like a shout, you know, it was like an act of like, there was something quite incendiary about doing this movie. And I thought it was really exciting to be in that context where sometimes there's a lot of weight, you know, and there's a lot at stake, you know, and there is, you know, particularly it's very interesting as a filmmaker to be in Cannes. It was really, when I think about it, it's like to be in Cannes in 1 year with like a very kind of English language, uber star kind of classic story, you know? And so in the other year to be there with sort of the underdogs, you know, like in the sense that these are people that are sort of very marginal. I mean, talking about the characters. So for me, it was really exciting both times. But I think with Motel Destino, it was like super exciting in the sense it's almost like I was disrupting, you know, the whole Cannes selection. And I think for me, that was really, really, it was beautiful. And I think it's one of the points of making this film. It's like to create a sense of disruption and to question. And the last thing I would say about Cannes last year is like, there's a sense of like trashiness, as I said in the film. There's a sense of roughness that I was always looking for, you know, when I was making the film. And so it was great to bring that kind of mess, you know, to the Croisette.
Yeah. Ruffle people up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess in terms of what's coming next, a bit like when you were doing Firebrand, maybe you were already thinking about Motel Destino. Did you have the same moment on the set for this one where you're thinking about the next thing?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it's funny because after Firebrand, I was actually supposed to be shooting the movie I shot last year. But then, you know, scheduling questions and casting and stuff, we pushed it to last year. So I was shooting I was shooting Motel Destino. As I finished, I was already sort of scouting for the one that we just shot. So we shot something in November last year, which I'm editing now. So it was already on my mind. The script was there, but it was just not the moment that it came together. So yes, I think I'm on like a filmmaking binge. Like I just love
you're
it
so
so
prolific.
much. It's amazing. I'm at an age that I feel quite confident with what I'm doing. I also feel like there's a momentum, and I also feel that there is possibilities. Particularly, that's why I also feel like I'm super lucky. Like there are possibilities in different places of the world to finance the stories I want to tell, and I think I need to embrace it. I remember that it took me like 8 years to make my first feature. Now I can't stop, I just need to, and I just have so much that I would like to tell in terms of stories and characters. So yeah, I'm on a little bit of a binge.
Can you give us a bit of a glimpse of what this next film
Yeah,
entails?
of
Or are you
course. Yeah, yeah,
superstitious about
yeah.
these things? I don't
No,
know.
no,
No,
it's
no,
fine.
no.
I mean, it's a movie that it's very much, it's interesting. This was not a plan, but it kind of became this way. Firebrand was very much sort of this immense patriarch slash monster slash hero, which was Henry, and then Catherine. And then I think Motel Destino has also this really kind of toxic, not working class man, but somehow this toxic sort of privileged white man, living in a place which is not his home. And this new one is also about a somehow kind of very violent, not physically, physically violent father, like it's the story of a family which sort of disintegrates, from the perspective of one of the kids in the family. It's a movie about privilege, but it's also a movie about kind of this very toxic male character who is the father, the main character of the film. And it's it's a movie about an American family living abroad and being very isolated and sort of drowning in its own privilege.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me.
No, thank you.
Huge
Thank you for
congrats
the
on this
interview.
movie. I can't wait for everyone here to see it. And best of luck with this next project too.
Thank you.